Morning. Today is December 3, 2019, regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. Welcome to everyone. We have a time certain at 9:30 today, which is our public comment. We also have a time certain, of course, at 1:30 when we finish our morning recess at around noon, and then start up around at 1:30, and then we have a 4 o'clock time certain for our executive session. We may take our second executive session a little earlier if we are running ahead in the meeting. So any other adjustments to the agenda that board members want to bring to my attention? Don't see any. Okay, and there's no emergency business. So next up, we'll invite our guests up to the table. That would be Vonnie Mickelson, President and CEO of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, Mayor Lundberg, Christine Lundberg, who is Springfield's mayor, Mike Eister, President of the Springfield Renaissance Development Corporation, I'm
introducing.
And then I'll just ask Commissioner.
This always happens.
This always happens. The commissioner whose name I never forget. Commissioner whose name I never forget. Joe Burney. That's right. The Joe Burney.
First off, let me just thank my fellow commissioners for the opportunity for us to hear this presentation, for allowing me to make that space. And I would just like to preface this by saying that there has been a steady rumbling of activity and hard work and perseverance in the Springfield downtown business area. And we have referenced it a couple of times. That rumbling has not sought the spotlight. It has not been political. It has been all about improving the lives of and commerce in the Springfield community. And so it's my absolute honor to introduce and let them take away, first off, the mayor of Springfield, who I know will speak later, Mayor Lundberg. It's delightful to see you here, Mayor. And two of the champions of this activity, Vonnie Mickelson, President and CEO of the Springfield Area Chamber, and Mike Eister, who wears many hats, among them Chair of the LCC Board of Education, but he is here today as Chair of the Springfield Renaissance Development Corporation. This is unlike protocol. Usually Austin would introduce you, but I begged for that to be my opportunity. So please, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and start. You've all read about it. You've all heard about it. Some of you have actually experienced it. The revitalization and renaissance of downtown Springfield is real. You may know that, in fact, I would say that what's happened in downtown Springfield may be the most exciting and successful economic development in the entire county for the past year. I want to thank Commissioner Joe Burney for inviting us to share just a little bit with you about that exciting news and tell you just a bit more about it. My name is Mike Eister. I'm the president of SRDC. SRDC started some of that economic development work with the Wild East Theater. It was a derelict, failing building. It was a wart among many warts on Main Street some 15 years ago, and SRDC purchased the building, redeveloped it, and eventually it became a gem and a jewel and a regional attraction. We think that the SRDC Wild East Theater was one of the things that sparked the renaissance that is underway right now and that is so exciting right now. We have just a few minutes to share with you, and the next thing we're going to do is look at a video that was provided by David Lovell. David is a developer who developed most of the buildings on the 300 block of Main Street where the activity is currently taking place. So go ahead, Austin, and cue up that video.
Good evening, leaders of Lane County, and thanks for allowing me to share. My name's David Lovell. Along with my partner Bob Miller and I, we formed Masaka Properties, and we are excited about downtown Springfield. About 13 years ago, when my wife and I first bought the Washburn building, when we traded in our 401k and thought, you know, there's some potential in downtown Springfield, people thought we were crazy. In the half block of the 300 block of downtown Springfield, there was 34 vacant apartment spaces at the time and many vacant storefronts, 3 crazy bars going on, and not a lot of safety and activity going on down there. But in the last 3 years, as you can see, serious momentum has paced its way to open up new opportunities in downtown Springfield. Altogether, my partner and I have brought in over $1 million of our own money. We've created and renovated 14 different living spaces, bringing 29 residents to the downtown block. On top of that, we've also brought in 10 new commercial spaces, renovated them from markets to restaurants to retail spaces, bringing nearly 40 jobs to the 300 block of downtown Main Street. And that, my friends, has created some serious momentum. So we're hoping that maybe you're as excited as we are about this new momentum and that you'll get on board with us and help with the downtown growth of Springfield. Our new idea coming up this next year is this boutique hotel. It's going to be about a 37-room hotel, approximately a $5 million project, which would bring average residents to about 70 on the overnight complex that we're prospecting here. 5 new commercial spaces. So if you can imagine bringing that many more visitors to downtown Springfield, what kind of economic impact, tourism, tax dollars, room tax revenue could happen in downtown Springfield. So I'm excited. I hope you're getting as excited as I am. As you can tell by the tone of my voice, I'd seriously like to see this project move forward. So anything you can do to help would be welcomed. I'd welcome a meeting or a phone call. And again, I thank you for being such great leaders in this great community. Good evening, leaders of Lane County, and thanks.
Again.
He is excited.
So I thank you, Mike, for the introduction, and thank you, David. You can sense that kind of excitement, enthusiasm, and drive, and that's what's behind the momentum. We feel it and we see it every day, and it's quite thrilling. It's not hard to be inspired and motivated by what's going on in downtown, the innovative minds and the tenacity of the work that we've seen. So thank you again, Commissioner Burney and all the Board of County Commissioners for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we don't see every day, what I have a privilege of seeing and my partners and the other champions in the community do. It's quite remarkable. Defining the character of a city, it's always found in its downtown core. It's the locally owned and operated businesses. It's the cultural assets, the historic assets, the entrepreneurial assets. This is what we value and need, and revitalization is hard work, and it demands collaborative effort. It demands collaboration between the businesses and from organizations like the SRDC and the Chamber of Commerce and our local governments, whether it's our city government or other public agencies in downtown. That's what we're seeing happening all around us in downtown. So on this slide, you'll see I noted a couple of things that are important on the investment side. You had an opportunity to hear from one of our local investors and developers, an innovative developer. There are many more like them. They are place enhancements. I'll talk more about the private investments that we're seeing, and millions of dollars have gone in the last few years. At the Western Gateway, Swallowtail Spirits just opened a tasting room and distillery. They totally renovated a former auto body shop. It's on the western gate of the downtown area. Outdoor seating and a tasting room. In the center of the downtown core, Systems West engineers came in a few years ago. There are now 30-plus employees. They renovated a vacant building. It was a former bank on the Main Street 300 block, where we see a lot of the activity going on, a lot of the core. David Lovell's properties, also the Fry and Rankin building, all up and down, first floor commercial tenants, second floor apartments. some 40-plus apartments. And then, of course, the Public House Hub down again around the corner in the central core. So renovations now are going on still at the Public House on the second floor, a new gathering space, a small gathering space. They're calling it the attic. So look for that coming live soon. I won't go into the public investments. Mayor Lundberg, I'm sure, can speak to those much better than I, but I will say that it's a pleasure when you cut the ribbon or at a new business or one that has moved into town, and when you ask them how their experience has been, it's always positive, ultimately positive. It's a pleasure working with the city. I think the city has done a wonderful job in promoting a business-friendly culture, and that's paid off. They work collaboratively with the business community, and that too has paid off and incredibly important. The investment in place enhancements like public art and infrastructure too make a big difference. Anything from murals to storm drains to street lighting and public safety. So we're really proud of what our public agencies have done in downtown Springfield as well. So, but what's behind the new energy and the cool vibe? Well, quite a few things. I'll be as quick as I possibly can so I can leave some time for Mayor Lundberg. But this is what's really important. It's the experience at the core, the tasting rooms, the escape rooms, the arts and crafts and wine, and believe it or not, the axe throwing and beer. So there's those types of experiences, the neighborhood grocers and retailers, the lifestyle and the healthy living. Central to all this really are the community-minded entrepreneurial go-getters. And this is what I'd like to talk a little bit about here. We count some 40-plus locally owned businesses opened in downtown, joining quality anchor employers like IEQ Technology, Lithia Toyota, Timber Products, Winant's Family Health Foods, banking and insurance companies, and those newer catalytic anchors like Planktown, Public House, Urban Lumber Company, and Systems West Engineers. So the common thread among all of these folks, both newer, and legacy employers, by and large, are looking for more than just a place to hang their sign. They're invested in building community, they're civically engaged, they're committed to being good neighbors, and they're hungry for more. So a good future in store. I won't go too much into this, but I want to call out one of those emerging sectors that we're seeing, and that's a growing creative industry professionals. These folks, combined with the artisans, have, at their own initiative, come together to facilitate their entrepreneurial connections and collaborations. They've been inspired by the history of making at the city's commercial beginnings, formed their identity brand, the Booth Kelly Makers District, and they hold monthly meetings. If you attend one of their meetings, you'll get treated to an Inside the Maker's Mind kind of tour and meet glass artists, metal fabricators, bankers, architects, vintage automobile restorers, the whole gamut, software designers. Love that group. We've rallied behind them. It is grassroots effort at its best. So a couple of final thoughts on the characteristics, and two of them notable is the diversity and the best-in-class brands that we're seeing in the downtown core. Industry, diversity, we've got food and beverage, creative design and engineering, neighborhood grocers, specialty and lifestyle furnishings, boutiques, wood products, and so on. In the food category, it's almost an international mecca, honestly. So we've got Americana, coffee shops, bakeries, but we also have Hawaiian, Italian, Asian, Ethiopian, German fusion, and now vegan. Quite remarkable. And as Commissioner Buck noted at a recent workshop that we had, the Register Guard did a feature article when we went to take a look at women business owners and entrepreneurs in the downtown area, both new and legacy. We had a hard time inventorying all. We ended up with a list of more than 50, and they were featured in that article, and many of them are here today with us again as well. So best-in-class brands, I do want to call this out because it's not often that we think of ourselves as best-in-class, world-class brands with notoriety, both national and international, locally grown and operated, couple I will mention. Swallowtail Spirits, a premium spirits distillery that I mentioned earlier, just opened a tasting room in downtown. In the first 8 months as a licensed distillery, received 8 national and international awards, including Oregon Distillery of the Year. Public House, Men's Journal's top 10 coolest places in America to drink craft beer. Lithia Toyota, high standards for customer satisfaction. Toyota Motor Sales coveted President's Award in 2019. Systems West Engineers 2019 Building Excellence Award in New Construction Commissioning, and 2019 100 Best Green Workplaces in Oregon. Humming along within a mile are homegrown legacy manufacturing employers. World-class brands such as Roseboro, the largest glue lamp producer in the country, Swanson, which touts state-of-the-art mill that attracts international industry tours to the site, Timber Products corporate office, Fran's Bakery in Glenwood, and finally Ninewood, which you see are above you and all around you, produced at Ninewood in Springfield at the manufacturing place. Ninewood has both national and regional awards of excellence in wood products design and finishings. They also tout green values and were the first business in Springfield to earn the Bring Recycling Rethink Certification Award. So we're very proud of these businesses. I will say that it's an honor and a privilege, again, to be a spoke in the wheel of this great revitalization in downtown Springfield. It's one thing to hear or read about these individuals. It's another to know them and experience working with them. And I'd like to invite a number of those business leaders who are here in the room today to stand to be recognized by the commissioners. We have IQ Technology, Systems West Engineers, Ninewood, hi, Cornbread Cafe, and Campfire Collaborative, and Brenda Hansen over there, Horseman Insurance. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present on behalf of the Downtown Springfield Revitalization.
So, good morning. Chair Sorensen and County Commissioners, I'm Mayor Christine Lundberg from Springfield, and so I want to thank you, Commissioner Burney, for inviting us to come. I will fill in some of the spots to talk about the city of Springfield because, like you all, as public officials, you have to figure out how the heck you're going to get from here to here. So I'll go back, and I was actually on the council when everything I'm going to say actually transpired. So way back when somebody like a county commissioner would come to Springfield because we were going to have a 5 o'clock meeting, and they would want to come and we'll just have coffee, is there was no place open in Springfield because, and that was before my time, the city decided that SDC charges, transportation SDC charges, would be a good idea to raise them if you stayed open after 4 o'clock. So everybody closed at 4 o'clock. Downtown Springfield pretty much shuttered and went home, except for the bars that we didn't necessarily want to stay open, but because nobody else was open, they had pretty much free run of downtown. So what ensued was an atmosphere and clientele that promoted itself and did not promote family-friendly or anything else. So nobody was downtown except those bars. So what we did was, one of the first things was to waive all the transportation SDCs if you stayed open after 4, but we hadn't changed the atmosphere yet. So that didn't necessarily work. So the next step we took was to, if you got arrested for prostitution or for drug dealing downtown, is we put an ordinance in place that if you got arrested again, that you were banned from downtown for 3 months. So we started the ball rolling with that. So then in that same kind of time frame, SRDC developed the Wildish Theater. They started going down that. And understand there was a lot of public dollars that went in to these facilities because that's how you get a big turnaround. It's up to the city, it's up to the county, it's us as public officials to help everybody be successful. So then Wildish Theater started, but one of the biggest thing we did is just take on the bars that were downtown. And I appreciate the OLCC, but their job is to try and make sure that establishments can stay open by monitoring or giving a plan or whatever. And we had realized that just wasn't going to work with some of the bars. It just needed to go. So what we did is put in a mountain of work, and the book that went with it is about this thick, of why some of those downtown bars needed to leave. And eventually that happened. And when that happened, it really started to turn things around. We actually got high schools because we have high schools down there now. So now there's kids hanging out downtown, which is exactly what you want to see happen because it gives a sense of community and it gives a sense of how much there is a trust level that there's parents that will allow their kids to be downtown. A3 is very successful, and those kids come from all over that attend the downtown schools. So also in that same time frame, St. Vincent de Paul did the Royal Building, and Terry McDonald and all of his, I want to say audacity, asked for 2 years worth of CDBG money. And he pretty much got it, but he made that huge investment in the Royal Building, and it paid off greatly because it showed that we could start changing things up. And the LTD put in the Springfield Transit Station, and then we started to work on some of the other things that were very key to the turnaround. The businesses all wanted lighting, and now when you go downtown Springfield, that's exactly what you see. And the first set of lighting came in that we didn't even have to put in anything underground. It was already there. So it's been one of the most successful pieces of the downtown turnaround because we didn't have those god-awful orange-ish lights anymore. We had street-level pedestrian lighting. That made a huge difference. All of our artwork, the Kesey mural, the Simpsons mural, our drain art.
Yeah.
You know, we want clean water to go out into our rivers. That all came about. We did our 2010 125th anniversary and put in the drift boat at the entrance to downtown. So all in all, we've made a lot of progress. We have our parking program is in place now. Booth Kelly Makers District, that was organic. They did that all by themselves. And Discover Downtown, you can see commercials now for coming to the downtown core. People have invested in downtown, but it took a whole bunch of commitment on the part of the city of Springfield and the council that I want to thank, and the Springfield city staff for sticking with it and making this turnaround. And this year we had our first annual block party, and so there's lots more to come. And of course now we're going to work on Glenwood because it's really one big downtown that just has a river that runs through it, and you'll have a brand new indoor track to match the rest of downtown, and all the redevelopment's going to go on, and pretty soon downtown Springfield to downtown Eugene is just going to be beautiful all the way through. So thank you so very much for letting us come and brag. Oh, and I'm going to leave you copies of some of the highlights of what's occurred. Okay.
Yeah, Joe, do you want to make some more comments, or?
No, only that it's my honor to be associated with these efforts, truly. I'm breaking protocol by by asking for this presentation. And I want to also acknowledge that Commissioner Farr has preceded me in terms of staying in and being a partner with Springfield, even though we are not part of the district that he represents. And for all the businesses, the young entrepreneurs, the people who are investing, you are what this is all about. So I'm blown away that you're even here. Thank you so much for taking time from your establishments. Vonnie, Mike, Mayor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was going to say, the commissioners want to to make a few remarks because this is significant for the entire community. These developments, both public sector developments like the transit station or all the private sector developments that have been talked about, this is really good for everyone. And I just wanted to take a moment to say that Commissioner Burney, he's a dynamic leader. He's the kind of leader that brings people together. And a lot of this I know predates his time in elective office, but I think that this is the example of a leader that can really bring people together to get more of this momentum going. And last but not least, I want to join your remarks about all the business owners that are here. You know, public sector investments, whether it's lights or streets or transit stations, they can make a difference. They can be an important component of a revitalization, whether it's a small community up the Mackenzie River, up the Willamette River, wherever it might be in the county, or a bigger community. But without the private sector commitment and the vision that business leaders have for their own business as well as adjacent businesses, then you really get the dynamic effect of all of this working together. So I just want to make a special thanks to all of you for coming. I'm sure other commissioners want to make some remarks too. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. So back in 1993, Jim Branch hired a younger version of myself from across the country to be his new engineering manager, and I actually worked in downtown Springfield all through the mid-90s. So I have a connection there that I remember the bars downtown. They were known for a fight a night and two on Friday and Saturday. It was not the greatest place. Terry's was about the only place you get something to eat. You know, it was pretty dead once it got to be 5 o'clock. And at the same time, my wife, came out here with me, who's a graphic designer, and started working with his photographer. His name was David Lovell. And so I have this other connection where we've been longtime friends with David. And this has been an amazing turnaround because I've watched it happen over the years, this long-term connection. But the piece that kind of didn't get covered maybe on the public sector side, Christine, was the commitment Springfield made to public safety that kind of initiated this. The investment they made in a municipal jail, the investment they asked their voters to make in serial levies to support their police force. And it was that change in the climate of Springfield from kind of being a little bit of the old Wild West mill town with the bars and all that, to a place that had, order and people could feel safe downtown. And along with that, there was a commitment to a business-friendly climate. Whether it's in the permit department or changes in SDCs or whatever you all did, it was about getting to yes for people to get there. And all those things kind of combined. That commitment to public safety. People have to feel safe to invest. And changing the image of a community. And then that dedication to business climate. And I just want to acknowledge, a former commissioner's role in all this and former mayor for 10 years, Sid Lykin, and even going back to Mayor Bill Morissette, because he was the first mayor of Springfield I got to know. And the council at that time, that commitment ran all through that time period, from Bill to Sid to Christine. There's been this commitment over the years that I've watched since I became an Oregonian, where Springfield's made this transformation. And I just want to congratulate you all, the private investors like David Lovell that put their own treasure at risk, and the business community and the Springfield development folks. You guys have just done a great job, and congratulations on winning Best Downtown from the Eugene Weekly.
I also want to congratulate you and kind of build off what Commissioner Bozovich was saying. I began and built my small business in downtown Springfield a long time ago, also back in the days when the bars were pretty much the only other businesses downtown. It's definitely gone through a huge growth, and it took a lot of the work that you described to make that happen. And as a small business owner, you know, the investment you make in small businesses, in smaller communities that are even smaller than Springfield, this is kind of the light that they see at the end of the tunnel when they're trying to build their small businesses, is exactly what you've done. If we can invest more in those small businesses, we'll see other communities bloom just like downtown Springfield. And it does take several, different ways to address the problem, including public safety, including building your base and teaching those small businesses how to go through all the different steps to make their businesses successful, and then supporting them from the ground up, not only through the chamber, but also all the support you provide on the public level. I am so proud to see so many small businesses in Springfield, especially so many women-owned businesses. I think when you invest in small communities or small businesses like that, especially those that are minority-owned, those that are women-owned, you just find this huge prosperous growth, and that's what you've displayed, and so huge congratulations from me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, my love of Springfield is deep and abiding. My wife and I were married a little over 44 years ago, and the first 3 places we lived after we were married were in Springfield. 2 apartment complexes and 1 a mobile home park in East Springfield, Country Manor on Daisy Street. Love Springfield. I used to drive from East Springfield to Jerry's every day to work. And it's a long drive, especially if I missed the Warehouse train. Sometimes I'd be sitting there for 10 or 12 minutes waiting, and Jerry would be sitting there waiting for me. But I once again, a deep and abiding love for Springfield. It goes beyond that. You know, I loved my time as a varsity soccer coach at Springfield High School when Bill Morissette was a teacher. And then later, 1998 was a pretty big year for Springfield when I was the president of the Eugene City Council, and we had a negotiation with Springfield, and the official term was Springfield was transferred comprehensive land use jurisdiction of Glenwood, and things changed in Glenwood beginning at that point in time. Mayor Lundberg, you say that downtown Springfield down to downtown Eugene the drive is just going to be beautiful, and I agree. The work that's going on, and Commissioner Burney is integral in that. And the county has been integral in some of the transportation remodeling. The double roundabout is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. If you know how to negotiate that, that's one of the finest pieces of traffic engineering that I'm aware of. And once again, I just love Springfield. I spent time as the manager of the Gray's store, Gray's Garden Centers in East Springfield when it was a much bigger property. And Springfield is just a lovely place. I love going there. I love the revitalization that I'm seeing, and it just does my heart good to see it happening. And the time that I spend as you plan the indoor track facility, wow, what an exciting thing that is going to be for the entire community, for the entire region. We'll see the benefit of that. But really, what you're doing in Springfield, what you're all doing in Springfield is amazing. And I'd like to recognize Gabrielle Godero, who I spend a lot of time with on the Human Services Commission. So the work you're doing is not only business-oriented, it's human services-oriented, and it's coordinating between the City of Eugene, the City of Springfield, and Lane County in a new form of relationship that I've never seen in my many years serving as a Eugene City Councilor or on the Lane County Commission. I'm proud to say that Springfield is and will be in my heart and has been my home. Thank you for being here today, and thank you all thanks for Springfield. It's a wonderful place.
Thank you very much. Now, usually the board chair politely, transitions to the next item, but because this is a Springfield matter, I'm asking Commissioner Burney to do that.
By the way, when Commissioner Farr was the manager of Gray's in Springfield, my wife worked for him.
Yeah.
She told me what to do, by the way.
She hasn't changed. And now I would simply like to share that you have demonstrated, and all of you who are here, and thank you for being here. Your time to be here is more valuable than ours being here, and I understand that. Now you understand why each of the other commissioners cringe a little when I remind them that all four of them represent some part of Eugene, and I'm the only one that has the opportunity not to represent any part of Eugene, but to exclusively represent the community that's just been shared with you by our champions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed the Millers North Bend game in 1967. Okay, so, thank you so much. Really great, and thanks so much. We'll move on to our public comment, and Mr. Otterby, you're the only person that signed up, so please come forward and take your 3 minutes at this time.
Wow, I've enjoyed what's happening in Springfield. My wife and I really enjoy going to the pub there, the new pub, and my favorite's the Cornbread Cafe right there on Main Street. My name's Lon Otterby. I live up near the county line on the Mohawk River. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of a homeless group called House Everyone. And first of all, I wanted to thank Commissioner Farr for joining us and invite any of you to join us again in the future as we move along with the TAC program. I also want to thank you guys for the groundbreaking at the Commons. That's a big start on what's going to go on with the TAC for our folks that are less fortunate. Two of the things that I wanted to tell you about that we're working on with both of them actually with LTD. One is, and mentioned this with Commissioner Farr before, sanitary buses with showers. There's an outfit that we're dealing with and talking to in San Francisco, Lava May, which has a whole plan for converting older buses into hygiene buses for the folks that can move through the county, particularly in the Eugene-Springfield area. The other project that we're working on is as homeless people under the new ordinances are being moved out of downtown Eugene, we see a need for something more permanent in bus passes, not just daily passes, but passes for people to get back into town, to their jobs, to their appointments, to the library, for get their children to for the homeless children that we do have here also to their schools. And so LTD is already working on that, and we've joined with them talking on how that's going to happen. So those are a couple of things I just wanted to bring you up to date on. Thank you so much for your participation in the TAC program. I think that's going to make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone that has not signed up for public comment that wants to give public comment? All right, well, thank you very much. We will move on to our item 4, Commissioner's response to public comments. Any other issues and remonstrance? Do any commissioners want to be recognized to make a remonstrance? Commissioner Farr?
Not a remonstrance, but another issue. And while folks are here, I'd like to point out that I was reading in the county news this last week that a county crisis center providing an alternative to jail has been opened in Chatham County, Georgia. I'm looking at our Health and Human Services staff in the back, and we're working on a crisis center, as you know, here in Lane County. We gave $1 million seed money last year in the current year's budget to work toward developing a crisis center as an alternative to jail. And if you look at the reason they built the crisis center in Georgia was the county was working on a plan and found that around 48% of their annual operating budget was spent on the detention center, the courts, and the sheriff's department, and that people were being sent into the judicial system as opposed to being sent into treatment. And that's what a crisis center is all about. And we are actively looking at models that are springing up throughout the United States and throughout Oregon to see what Lane County's crisis center is going to look like and is going to be like. There's no fixed date on the horizon for when it's going to be built, but a lot of effort is being placed into that. And if you spend any time at the Mental Health Summit, which occurs every month out at the Serbu Center, out at LCBH, the discussion almost invariably, in fact invariably, revolves around a crisis center as an alternative to sending people to jail, which is currently the default. If someone is in crisis and police respond, the only place they have to take them currently is the jail. And a crisis center is going to give an alternative where triage can happen and actual overnight stay can occur, as opposed to our Hourglass facility, which is a 23-hour facility where people in crisis can be taken, but by the end of the day, they are back, returned to the environment that they left while their crisis began. So thanks for the work that we are engaging in moving toward a crisis center. We'll be talking about that a lot in the next 1, 2, 4, 5 years, I'm sure of it, until we have a viable working center where people can spend time seeking treatment as opposed to sitting in a jail cell. Thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioners want to make any? Commissioner Bozevich?
So just to continue that a little bit, a couple weeks ago, I posted an article up on my West Lane Commissioner's Facebook page from the Medford Mail Tribune about the Marion County Crisis Center and kind of promoting the idea of having a Jackson County Crisis Center for similar reasons. And they talk about opening a mental health crisis center, and teaming therapists with police in Marion County has cut the number of people booked in their jail by thousands of years. And they basically said they used to average 19 to 20,000 bookings a year about a decade ago, and since they opened the center and started that teaming, it's down to about 15,000 bookings a year. So just an amazing ability to divert people out of the criminal justice system with the crisis center. And what I'd also like to point people on my Facebook page, I just posted yesterday a link to a request by NACO for folks to get a hold of their federal representatives and support a couple bills that they have in front of them. And those bills basically are trying to fix a problem in our Medicaid system where people lose their benefits once charged with a crime. Not convicted, just charged. And once they come into custody, they're no longer receiving their medical health insurance benefits. So the local taxpayers here in this state and in this county end up paying for medical services for those folks, taking away resources that could be going into a crisis center. So there are two bills right now in front of Congress, Senate 2626 and 2628, that you need to ask your representatives to support, because if we could continue that provision of health benefits up until they're actually found guilty of a crime, because I think there's a presumption of innocence in this country that's pretty important, those local resources could be diverted to other services. In addition to that, it would also deal with an issue we have now with the aid and assist population we're sending to the state hospital, because those folks are also not compensated for, because they have, in order to be referred to the state hospital for aid and assist, they've been charged with a crime, and they lose their Medicaid benefits. And therefore, the state hospital system's draining, when they could be getting reimbursed for some of that care. So both those things are big issues where we could really be doing more in our mental health system if we were being reimbursed until somebody's actually convicted.
Okay, other commissioners? I'll just take a moment to mention that the National Association of Counties Legislative Conference is March 29 to February 29 to March 4 in Washington, D.C. And in conjunction with that conference are a number of committee meetings. I bring this up today because the deadline for getting the early registration waiver, the expense of it, it expires on December 13. And that's been on my calendar for a long time because I wanted to decide whether I could go or not. And basically, I can't go. So if other commissioners are going to go, there's a benefit to the taxpayer and to the county to register for that conference prior to the 13th of December. So I'll bring that up today in case any of you are planning to go to that conference. Next Tuesday is the anniversary of the signing of the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, and Mr. Rickoff, see, it's not just you. Mr. Rickoff is preparing something for next week's meeting to make note of that important observation. And if there are no other remonstrances, are there any other? None? Okay, good. We'll move on then to our consent calendar. And that is our opportunity to present a series of board orders today dealing with the county administration, sheriff's office. And these items are all deemed in public works, all deemed relatively non-controversial. Are there any items on the consent calendar that commissioners want to have discussed separately? Seeing none, I'll recognize any commissioner that wants to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve the consent calendar as printed and proposed in our December 3 agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion carries 5-0, and the orders are adopted unanimously by the board. Next up, we are now to item 7A, and we'll ask our friends from Health and Human Services to come forward. Order 19-12-03-07 in the matter of approving 3 contracts, including an administrative services agreement for coordinated care organization services with Pacific Source, and 8 amendments, and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved contracts and amendments. With us to discuss this item is Karen Gaffney. Welcome, Ms. Gaffney.
Morning, Chair Sorensen and board members. We try and have the title be long enough to allow me time to get up here and get settled.
From the back of the room.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. The item before you today is typically considered a routine item. It's contracts and amendments to contracts. However, our agreement with the board is when there are items that are new contracts that we would take an opportunity to talk about that a little bit and give you the chance to answer any questions. So happy to do that about anything in the packet. I would lift up one of the new contracts in particular for you today, and that's a new contract with Pacific Source for us. That is our administrative services and clinical agreement to work with Pacific Source in their new capacity starting January 1st as a coordinated care organization in the community. As you know from our discussions last year, the Oregon Health Authority rebid those contracts and ultimately identified 2 contracts in Lane County for coordinated care organizations, and Lane County will contract with both of those entities, so we'll have contracts moving into 2020 with both Trillium as a CCO and Pacific Source as a CCO, but it is our contract with Pacific Source is a new one, and so I would identify that that is part of this agreement. And the dollar amount will be, is a little flexible as the state is still determining how many Oregon Health Plan members will be assigned to each of those CCOs. And so the amount of our contract with Trillium and Pacific Source will be dependent on how those lives end up ultimately. So we've gone a little high on the dollar amount just to make sure that as that eventually works itself out, that we don't need to come back and amend that. As a reminder, the administrative services that we provide for the CCO are in the area of behavioral health. So Pacific Source is contracting with us to provide our staff on site at Pacific Source to help provide care coordination to Oregon Health Plan members related to their substance use treatment and mental health treatment. So we'll provide staff on site there. We also provide services through our public health division to do prevention work and help coordinate those efforts with the CCO around their community health improvement plan. So that's included in this. And then, of course, we do also provide clinical services through both the community health centers of Lane County and through our behavioral health and public health clinics. So that is my summary for contracts, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Mr. Chair, at this point, I would like to declare a potential conflict of interest. My wife, Debbie Farr, continues to work for Trillium, which is one of our team of CCOs that we engage or that are engaging in Lane County. I don't view this as an actual conflict of interest for this discussion or subsequent vote, but I will identify it as a potential. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Bozievich.
So I just want to note, we bury these contracts sometimes in these huge lists of contracts and votes and all that, and just want to call one out in particular so that folks know. And it's just not a big contract. It's only $233,000, so it doesn't seem that big compared to $22 million. But it's a contract to expand behavioral health into 2 school-based health centers at Churchill, North Eugene. And as we've been talking consistently in this board about the crisis of teen suicide in our community, this is just one step to addressing that. And I just, want to call that out. That there's, I could go through and probably in every one of these talk about what a great thing it is for our community. I mean, there's all sorts of things in here. But I just wanted to note that one. Just to kind of give people an idea that maybe you might want to look at some of our board materials a little bit more closely from time to time and see some of the great work we're doing that kind of gets just buried in approving contracts.
Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, I'll accept a motion to approve the order as presented.
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Bozievich to approve Order 19-12-03-07 as presented. Any further discussion? Seeing none, go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The order is adopted unanimously. Thank you very much. And we actually, the agenda team wanted this on the regular agenda item just for the purposes of identifying some of these things. So thank you, Commissioner, for pointing out several of them. Okay, now my most favorite quote of all today is William Randolph Hearst, who said, "You furnish the pictures and I'll provide the war." Now, next item up is item 7B, Order 19-12-03-08, in the matter of waiving the restrictions of ORS 430.590.123 to use the building located at 432 West 11th Avenue, Eugene, Oregon, for use as a medication-assisted treatment program, MAT clinic, as authorized by ORS 430.5904. Karen Gaffney and Kachina Inman, Director and Assistant Director of the Lane County Department of Health and Human Services, are here to present this item. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. Kachina and I are going to tag team a little bit this item this morning, and I want to start by appreciating this particular moment and anchoring this item both to your strategic plan and to some other work that you've been doing this year. You may recall that in your strategic plan, in our strategic plan, we've identified increasing access to behavioral health services as a priority for the county. And the project that we're going to talk about in two phases. The first phase is today, and then we will come back to you for a decision about purchasing the building in 2 weeks, is really all about expanding access to medication-assisted treatment for people in our community. And the second prior action I would anchor this to is, you may recall in September, you spent a significant amount of time talking about the opiate crisis in our community, and talking about what could we do as a community to address that. And one of the important threads from that conversation that I would lift up today is access to treatment on demand is critical if we're going to address the opiate crisis in our communities. And today we have an opportunity to really look at how do we eliminate barriers and be able to increase access to treatment for people in our community. So we're excited to bring this opportunity for you today. As I said, it's two different items. So today what we want to talk about is your authority as a Board of Commissioners to waive a particular citing requirement for medication-assisted treatment programs, methadone programs in particular. So we'll take that item up today, and then as part of our due diligence process for being able to move forward with the building. And then we'll have the larger discussion in 2 weeks about the actual purchase of the building. But it only makes sense to talk about the waiver in the context of ultimately our plan to be able to acquire this building and be able to expand access to treatment. So with that, I would, again, remind you about our medication-assisted treatment program. At Lane County Health and Human Services, we've been providing methadone since the 70s, so this is not a new service for us. The program is embedded as part of our behavioral health division and part of our federally qualified health center, so that program does not receive any county general fund. We're able to sustain those services based on the billing that we achieve through that program. It includes, when we talk about medication-assisted treatment, that's both methadone, which we've provided since the 70s, and buprenorphine, which we've added more recently. Both of those are provided in the context of treatment. So it's not just medication, but it really is medication-assisted treatment. So all of our clients in that program, in addition to receiving the medication, also receive individual therapy, group therapy. We do a whole lot of case management for people in order to help them address a lot of the impacts that addiction has had on their lives. What I will underscore in terms of medication-assisted treatment is that it is really the gold standard of addiction treatment. When you look at the data about what is effective for being able to address opiate addictions, it absolutely is a medication-assisted treatment approach, and that's what we're talking about today. Hinted earlier that we have a need to expand access to treatment in our community. We absolutely have not been able to keep up with demand. That's both in our clinic and community-wide. Our current clinic is located on the ground floor of the Charnelton Health Building, and we have done our best to add therapists over the years in order to address waiting lists, and we have absolutely maxed out the space in that building. Being able to move to a new site and a larger site will allow us to bring in more providers and ultimately provide services to more clients who need us in the community. And in addiction treatment, the ability to provide treatment on demand is really critical. What we are able to do right now is put people on a waiting list, and as I'm sure you can imagine, that's not really effective to say to someone who's finally ready to engage in treatment, we'll get back to you in 4 weeks or 6 weeks. So we really need to be able to move people in when they're ready. Ultimately, the change in this project will allow us to expand both our methadone and our buprenorphine treatment numbers, and those are up on the slide. Methadone, we would expect to be able to move up to about 300 clients, and our our buprenorphine capacity and that's a slightly different treatment modality, but would increase to 500 people. So that's a significant difference we're able to make in the community. The slide talks about implementing our hub and spoke model. And you may or may not recall, I think we talked about that a little bit in budget last year, that for our addiction treatment, particularly medication-assisted treatment, sometimes people, when they're new to treatment or in crisis, need much more intensive services. And so we think about that as the hub. And then as people get stabilized, they're able to continue on their medication but need less intensive treatment. And so in that way, we would be able to see them less frequently or ultimately move them into a primary care environment. So that's our spoke, as they, just like you would as you get your diabetes under control, you're able to manage that in a primary care environment. And that would be the same in this service. So we have found this fantastic new building. And it's, as you know, conversations we've had, it's the old Jones and Roth is how we refer to it. It's at 432 West 11th. It allows for increased parking. It is right on the transit corridor, and it's really a perfect location for us to be able to expand this site. And when we began, as part of our due diligence, talking with the state about the site, they said, yeah, that's a great site, but what about that child care center that's there? That actually, despite walking the neighborhood, it's not an obvious child care center, but it is registered with the state, and it falls within the 1,000 feet limitation on siting. So what, I guess I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about what the legislature did last year. There are significant restrictions, and have been for a long time, about where methadone clinics can be sited. One of those restrictions is it needs to be at least 1,000 feet away from a school or a daycare provider. And the legislature, in its wisdom last session, heard lots of testimony from around the state about how restrictive that is and how difficult it is to site these much-needed clinics. Because it also needs to be close to transportation, accessible to people with addictions, and a whole host of other characteristics for siting. So the legislature passed Senate Bill 910 last session that acknowledged that sometimes it would make sense to waive that 1,000-foot restriction, and the legislature gave that authority to local counties and boards of health to be able to make that determination. And up on the slide is the specific language about the ability to waive the siting restrictions to the extent necessary to remove unreasonable barriers to patients accessing medically necessary treatment at methadone clinics. So that law was written specifically for the case that's in front of us right now. As I said, this particular site, from our assessment, is ideal. It meets the zoning requirements. It allows for the growth of our medication-assisted treatment services. It's a permitted use in that site. And I will say we've worked extensively with the city of Eugene to make sure that it meets all of the zoning requirements in the city, and we're confident that that is true, and meets the specific requirement in the city that any drug treatment program needs to be within a quarter mile of a major transit. So all of that constellation of siting requirements comes into play in picking a site. And today we are before you to ask that you waive that 1,000-foot in this particular instance for citing this center. And give you a sense, so this is the map, and it's not great. I know you have a copy in your packet as well. Just to give you a sense of where the daycare center is in relation to this particular building, it's 812 feet away, so it certainly is not right next door. It's not in the same block. It's not on the same street. It's not visible from between the daycare center and our proposed medication-assisted treatment site there. So in terms of mitigating factors, we believe that it really does not impact the operations of the daycare center at all. Before we brought this to you, we wanted to make sure we talked with the daycare provider, we talked with the community, did some outreach, and so I'm going to let Kachina walk through that process before we open it up for questions.
Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, we spent a lot of time outreaching to the community. And as a quick overview, we attended a neighborhood association meeting. We made sure information was provided in the neighborhood association newsletters and distribution lists. We hosted 2 community meetings and handed out over 140 flyers to advertise for those community meetings. And then Jason, our public information officer, was also out talking to business owners and residents in the community. We did outreach, and Jason and I had an opportunity to talk directly to the daycare provider, and at that time, she didn't state any concerns and seemed to be fairly supportive of having treatments, knowing a treatment site, knowing the importance of this for the community. We also inquired about how best to outreach to the parents, knowing that's a really critical audience in that community. And we provided packets of information for the parents so that they understood the importance of these services in the community and offered an opportunity to answer any questions. And lastly, we mailed 2,100 letters to the neighborhood residents, just ensuring that everyone had this information. We realized that if we move forward with this, this is an ongoing relationship with the neighborhood and something that we will want to continue to have conversations if concerns may arise. So in summary, this is a real opportunity to provide critical services to our community. As Karen noted, and you all are very well aware, we are dealing with an opioid crisis, and we know this is an evidence-based strategy that has a huge impact. And I also just want to highlight some of the outcomes that we've seen in the surveys that we have done with those individuals using our services. So we've seen during the year surveyed over an 80% reduction, or 80% of patients stopped using opioids, so huge success there. We also see patients' lives improve, and this means improvement in health and housing and employment and in their relationships. And lastly, for those that had previously been involved in the criminal system, we saw a reduction in criminal activity. So again, we are here today to request that waiver for the 1,000-foot requirement, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And I also want to acknowledge that Terry Fields, the supervisor of our MAT program, is here in the audience if you have any really hard questions. Kachine and I will point either to her or to Jason Davis, who's also here with us today.
Okay, any questions, comments from commissioners?
You know, excuse me, when we first talked about this, I was particularly concerned about the proximity of the daycare center, only because my child just got out of daycare and started kindergarten, so I know exactly what those moms and dads would be feeling. But I'm so happy with the outreach that you've been able to do. And the feedback that you've gotten has been very promising. And, you know, some of the concerns that people could potentially have regarding the proximity may not necessarily be with the location of this particular center, but how many folks we're seeing camping on the streets in downtown in general. And that's an issue we still have to work out and still find solutions for. I see this clinic as a therapeutic medical center, and that is exactly what we need in our community to fight our opioid epidemic. So I'm very supportive.
And so you're going to make a motion.
I certainly can.
Settle.
Settle.
I move approval of item 7B, order 19-12-03-08, in the matter of waiving the restrictions of ORS 430.5901-3 to use the building located at 432 West 11th Avenue, Eugene, for use as a medication assistant treatment program clinic as authorized by ORS 430.594.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Bernie to approve the order as presented. Further discussion. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the motion. I'm going to support the motion. You've done your research, you've done the outreach. It doesn't lessen the impact on the community, and particularly on a childcare facility. Commissioner Buck mentions the caring that a parent has regarding the childcare facility. Grandparents do also, and I pick up my 3-year-old grandchild at daycare from time to time, which is adjacent, close by Willamette High School. And any disruption from any source is a potential issue for the daycare center, including lots of students walking by, which sometimes happens. And so I think the request that I would have is that we monitor, of course, I don't have to ask you to do that, do I? Any incidents that may occur as a result of the patients that we treat at the medical assisted treatment facility. And, medical assisted treatment, you said something, Ms. Gaffney, that really is significant, and it really is a significant factor in why I'm supporting this motion, and that is that access to treatment on demand is critical if we're going to address the opioid addiction in our community. And in the last decade, teen opioid addiction has doubled, according to reports that I've read. And we don't see any lessening in that. In fact, as it becomes more available, and in many cases less expensive, people are turning to it. Where other drugs used to be the drug of choice, it's becoming a drug of choice, and it is obviously highly addictive. And medical-assisted treatment is effective. We know that. And it's not only effective for the short term, it's effective for the long term. It changes people's lives, and it not only changes their lives, but the people around them. So the more that we can do in Lane County in our stated goal of treating and addressing the opioid addiction issue that we have is to provide more on-demand medical-assisted treatment. So bravo, I will support this and support all of our efforts toward curbing teen addiction and all addiction regarding the ongoing and the escalating opioid crisis that we have in this nation. So thank you very much for bringing this for us. Thank you for taking very good care of the surrounding community. It's essential because the Abbey is close by also. A lot of retired folks who use that as a place to walk up and down. And it's essential that we make sure that we do our part and continue in our efforts to make sure certainly it's a safe place for people to spend their leisure hours. And once again, if you go by there right now, the folks from the Abbey have difficulty because we have camping along the sidewalks right there. And people associate one issue with another issue. So as we address the different issues, it's important to understand that medical-assisted treatment is something that we are devoted to, something that we know will work, and something that as a board we are committed to devoting the resources to ensuring on-demand treatment in our community. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr and Chair Sorensen, I appreciate that, and what it reminded me of was really a lovely story from one of the 2 community meetings that we held. As Kachina mentioned, neighbors came in, and what I heard loud and clear from the businesses there was appreciation for the fact that we were going to move in. The building has been vacant for quite some time, and people really look forward to us having our medical clinic there, being good stewards of the neighborhood, just like we are in this part of town, and really looking forward to our presence there. So I think we're seen as a very positive influence on the neighborhood by the businesses in that community.
Small follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I may, and that's to that people understand that this is opioid addiction. Methamphetamine is different, and many of the problems that we see that people associate with drug use are really methamphetamine, and there's no medication-assisted treatment that I'm aware of for methamphetamine at this point in time. It's an ongoing problem that we have to address in a different fashion. This is for opioid, and it is effective. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, and I apologize if I stray from speaking directly to the motion somewhat, but because the motion was made so quickly, I didn't get a chance to ask staff a couple questions, so I'm going to do that now, with the indulgence of the board. There was a video that was pretty popular a little while ago called "Seattle is Dying," and at the end of the video, they actually show what they think is one of the solutions, and lo and behold, it's medically assisted treatment for opiate addiction. So, as we're looking to solve some of our homeless crisis and our opioid crisis, this is a piece of that. is this clinic where people come for detox and initial addiction treatment?
Thank you. Commissioner Bozievich and Chair Sorensen, that's a great distinction. We do not manage a detox service at our facility. There are detox programs in the community, but that isn't what we provide in our facility. So people would come to us to meet the doctor, so that we do have physicians on site, get their initial clinical evaluation, and then we have therapists on site. It's outpatient treatment, depending on where they are in their particular treatment plan. They might come every day. We open at 6:30 in the morning, or they might come once a week, depending on what their needs are. But it is not a detox facility. It's not a day center where people stay for the whole day. It really is a medical clinic where people come to get the treatment they need and then are on their way to work or whatever else they're doing.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to make sure that distinction was clear to folks, because this is not about initial treatment of the addiction. This is really about a provision of a maintenance for folks that are staying off of opiates. You know, that's the whole point, is these drugs that are utilized in this treatment either are a substitute or a blocker. I'm not a physician. I'll let the technical people address that a little bit more, but it's people maintaining their sobriety are coming there. They're not supposed to be in full-blown addiction when they show up. And I think, and that kind of leads to my second question is, as part of that continued treatment, do they go through sobriety checks and UIs and
I can answer, Commissioner Bozievich, Chair Sorensen, I can answer that very high level, and then I'm also happy, if you'd like more details, to ask Terry to come up. We absolutely do regular UAs on our clients, and that is part of our treatment program. Would you like more detail?
No, that I just want to try, I'm trying to so for folks that, because some of the concerns I've heard, tend to be very emotional, and they think that we're having a bunch of people in full-blown addiction showing up in their neighborhood. And I want to try and make people understand. And maybe we do need to get Terry. My final question is, how long do people stay in MAT?
Would you mind just coming on up?
Yeah, because my understanding is people can actually be involved in MAT for years.
Yes, absolutely.
And be involved in successful careers while getting methadone and other treatments. So maybe if you want to address that, Terry.
Thank you, Commissioner. You're absolutely right. I mean, people come for a short time and they stay on it sometimes for years. And we do have professionals in the community that have been on it for years that are coming to us.
So I just kind of want to point out, this is, everyone wants to associate this somewhat with the camping on the sidewalks. Right. This could be your accountant that's because, they tweaked their back 10 years ago and got, prescribed too many opiates and ended up with an addiction problem, are now on MAT and maybe continuing on MAT. This is not necessarily the person on the street corner. So I want to have folks have that understanding, to maybe ease some of the emotions with that. I also want to point out that this clinic is located, down the street, across the corner, and all that stuff, that in between this clinic and the daycare center is a Eugene Municipal Court, which is where everyone that gets a misdemeanor criminal trespass, i.e. camping where they shouldn't, or gets a misdemeanor drug possession, i.e., found with, usable quantities of drugs, personal use quantities, goes for their court case. And it's been there for years within probably 500 feet of the daycare, and probably within 200, maybe even 150 feet is a full access, which is a social service provider. So to think that adding this clinic at an even further distance from this with this kind of clientele is going to present a risk for the children is if there isn't risk already with the fact that they're that close to the Eugene Muni Court and full access, I don't believe this is going to really be adding to that risk. So for that reason, I'm going to be supporting the motion to make a waiver that's less than 20% of the standard distance separation. 812 feet, versus 1,000. I mean, it's almost, we do these sort of waivers in our building codes. When people want to build within a setback or have a little bit of a variance in a numerical standard, we actually allow our building folks up to a certain level to make those, like within 10%, and if it goes up to maybe 20%, it might have to come before the planning director or the planning commission. There are these technical waivers of these numerical requirements, and to me, this just seems to be within that boundary. So thank you for answering a few questions about exactly what the clientele is and making sure people understand that. But it's such an important service as we're trying to recover from the opioid crisis, and this is a much needed and effective way of treating that opioid addiction.
I want to start and then I'm going to end. Coming back to what Commissioner Bozovich said, but I want to thank him for asking questions that he knew the answers to. But I think the answers are very important to communicate to the public, because really those answers would respond to all of the emails I've received about concerns about this location. So I want to, and I'll come back to that. First, am I correct in assuming that before the last legislative session, this would not be an option for our county?
It's correct. For methadone, those waivers were not permitted under law until last session.
And I presume also that the reason they are now permitted is because of the need and the desire for local communities that know their maps to weigh in so that the need can be responded to?
Yes, Commissioner Burney, Chair Sorensen, that's absolutely true. The request was actually made by Multnomah County. It's a phenomenon across the state that we need to expand access to treatment.
And I hope we won't be accused of following Multnomah County's lead and letting them think for us if we choose to support this also.
Promise.
I'm just kidding. You mentioned the feedback. You didn't mention the feedback. You mentioned the methodology, as we had discussed earlier, to ensure that you got feedback. The methodology sounded very comprehensive, but I didn't hear what the feedback was generally. I would be very interested in both the general feedback from all those engagements in anticipation of this potential move, and I'd also like to hear what the biggest concerns were that you ran into.
Thank you. Commissioner Burney, Chair Sorensen, I'm going to ponder that last question for a moment, what the biggest concerns were. We actually did not get huge turnouts at our meetings, despite the fact that Jason did literally, he said it was like he was in college again, leaving flyers for band concerts or something, literally leafleted the neighborhood.
Good to know his previous experience.
That's right. So we worked very hard to have people attend the meeting to get their questions answered. In the end, we primarily had some key business owners who were in that area who attended either of the meetings. And then Terry and Jason also did a very brief presentation at the Neighborhood Association. And I'll let Terry talk about what kind of feedback she was hearing from that constellation of meetings. Truly, what I heard were mostly questions, kind of the same questions we've talked about here. What are the type of clients? How often do they come? What would be the expected impact on the neighborhood, and then ultimately support for how we need to treat addiction in this community. So I don't know if you heard other things and what you think the biggest challenge you heard.
The first meeting, when we went to the Jefferson West Side Neighborhood Association meeting, it was just a very brief presentation about and early in our process about what we were going to do and wanted to do. And there was a zoning question. And, since then, as Karen said, we consulted with the city, but we also did an independent analysis of the zoning to be sure that, everything was in order there. But at that meeting, we did not hear much, so that was the very first one.
Yeah, so I don't know that we've had significant concerns that we've heard outside of what we've already talked about here, and I feel like those concerns were, for the most part, addressed. And our commitment, as Kachina said, to the neighborhood, that this is an ongoing relationship with the neighborhood. And so we absolutely, in the same way that we do here, if there are concerns that develop, our commitment is to work with the neighbors to resolve those.
Did you want to say anything? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, again, I said I was going to return to what Commissioner Bozovich said. I think that the answers to his questions and where that leaves us are absolutely critical for community understanding. This is really a medical clinic, no more or less imposing on a community or on a neighborhood than the medical clinic I go to when I go see my primary care physician. I really compliment you on the work. I compliment you on your commitment to this issue facing our community. I'll ask financial questions later, right? And I have no further questions. I support this motion also.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This is really good. I would just say, years ago, I recall a sex offender clinic that was being sited near an elementary school in my district, and I know the department at the time had struggled with how to locate this and had come up with a plan to locate it, and the neighbors did not like it, and I was persuaded by the neighbors to fight the clinic. So I was kind of on the opposite side of the department, and Ms. Gaffney's predecessor and I had a meeting. Were you at that meeting, Twin Oaks Elementary School?
I believe so.
Yeah, and the parents were there, and they had a lot of data, a lot of information. And I think that ultimately, the sex offender residence was moved to another area. Now, in this instance, I've gotten a fair amount of email from people asking about it as it's progressed to this point. But at each moment in the process, either the department, maybe you, I don't know, but certainly Jason Davis responded, had these outreach meetings, got in the news on it, and I think that the overwhelming response is this is a medical clinic. Just to highlight a couple of things, 80% of patients stop using opioids. Patients' lives improved in areas of health, housing, employment, and relationships. Criminal activity decreased. Pretty important things that we can do with this clinic. So, yes, there is the potential of a not in my backyard kind of response, but I think overall you guys have done a really good job to try to figure out a good location. And taking over a building that's a nice building but hasn't really been occupied for a while is also a big improvement, and that's also noted here. And as Commissioner Burney mentioned, we'll get into the arithmetic and all that later when we get to the point of the building purchase. So I think we need to have a vote on this. Is there anything further before we vote? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no, and the order is adopted as presented in our printed agenda by a vote of 5-0. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we are now at 10:30 approximately, so we can go on to our item 8A. And just a moment back to our adjustments. Now, if we did the first of the two executive sessions, we could do that in the BCC small at say in 40 minutes. Mr. Mokrajski, could we do that in the, could we do the executive session in the BCC small when this presentation's completed?
We had a 4 o'clock time certain exec sessions.
Yeah, but we have 2 executive sessions.
If you want to do it, I need to check on if the staff person is.
Okay.
That's all.
Why don't you check now, and my idea would be that we could knock off one of the 2 executive sessions this morning.
It sounds like the answer is yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So that'll be our plan, just to alert our friends in county council and whoever else they need to be taking over to the BCC small conference room, and we'll do our, try to get that done after this. So at this time, we'll call up item 8A. It's a discussion of the $15 per hour minimum wage for Lane County employees. The agenda team's been scheduling this at board request. Alana Holmes, Director of Lane County Department of Health, Lane County Human Resources Department is here. And let Ms. Holmes make your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen, Commissioners. Basically, as you stated, we're here today to provide information to the board as requested for a policy discussion on the establishment of a $15 an hour minimum wage for regular Lane County employees. So that's the framework for the discussion and the information that I have for you today. As far as information, this request was made this past summer to have us conduct research on what counties have established a minimum wage for entry-level employees that exceeds the state law and what the impacts would be of implementing such a policy for the county. So we'll walk through that. And just a note, when you talk about exceeding state law, I was checking the board today, and so the current minimum wage law is in effect until June 30th of 2020, and for the standard rate, it is $11.25 an hour, compared to a recognition of the Portland metro area having a higher cost of living. Their hourly rate is $12.50 an hour, and rural areas are $11 an hour, just for your information. So currently, Lane County does not have an established policy regarding a minimum wage threshold for entry-level county employees. Our practice is to look at our 5 comparable counties, to also consider internal equity, be mindful of any recruitment and/or retention issues that we are dealing with in certain classifications, and then try to really land to be within market by plus or minus 5%. That's kind of our goal. And so, and sometimes this work is also done in parallel when we have, when we're in collective bargaining and we're looking at classifications within those different agreements. So, when we think about the board goals and how this relates, I look to the strategic plan priority 4, our people and partnerships, to provide a safe, healthy, and inclusive work environment that attracts and retains a diverse, highly skilled workforce. And if we were to look at the financial and/or resource considerations of a potential policy on this topic, I would say at this point, it really is going to be determinant on a number of factors, and we can talk about those in more detail, but basically, we'd be looking at what are the number of employees that are sitting below the $15 an hour now. That would impact cost. And then ultimately, as we keep in mind pay equity concerns, if there would need to be any adjustments there, the cost of addressing potential pay grade increases as we go through collective bargaining discussions, and then ultimately, depending on the classifications and series that they connect upward to, the possibility of compression for supervisor pay for those that they supervise, depending on how close the pay between the two would be. So those are just some of the factors for consideration, depending on further board direction. So as you all, I see, are looking up at the slide that we have, this was in your packet, but we thought it would be helpful for those who might be watching for us to also have this displayed. This really is to demonstrate what we heard is the direct request from the board, which was, can you go out and do a survey for us of county government, local government, and find out what they're doing. Let's see what their pay is relating to their classifications for their lowest paid regular employees. And then I'll talk in a little bit, but we were also asked to seek out what the counties had as far as their philosophy and or policy regarding minimum wage for regular county employees. So, as you can see, this is an attempt to try to show you the range of survey respondents to the request that was made. I believe we had 20 counties and local governments that were surveyed, and we had 15 respond, so about a 75% response rate. Not all of those are listed. We, for purposes of a graphic, we limited it to counties. And then you'll notice there are asterisks next to Clackamas, Deschutes, Washington, Jackson, and Marion County. And the reason those are highlighted is because the board has designated those as the comparator counties that we use when we look at compensation. And then others are included for purposes of illustration so that you knew, of the variety of counties that were surveyed. And what we did was we listed the counties, then what's the lowest rate for their county employees listed in the second column, and we tried to put the classification attached to that. And then also the number of employees per county listed, so you can see there's a variety of, I think from 2,400 down to 460 employees, depending on the county. Their question about what's the philosophy, I think, we were looking to see, did any of the counties surveyed have a philosophy where they had implemented a policy of a minimum of $15 an hour as the base wage for any employees? And that was not the case with any, not only the ones listed, but any of the other survey respondents. They also indicated that they utilize a market-based pay philosophy, pretty consistent with what Lane County's practice is, with the goal of trying to be within 5% plus or minus of their comparators.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a very quick clarifying question?
Sure.
The rate listed, is that for regular employees? Does that include temporaries and F520s, or is that just regular?
Commissioner Farr, Chair Sorensen, that's a great question. For purposes of the discussion, we limited it to regular employees. We certainly have a little bit more information we could provide generically for other types of help. But for purposes of this discussion today, that's what we were looking at. So that is the first chart. And again, just for emphasis, there was not a single county that we surveyed that is using a $15 an hour minimum wage threshold for their employee base. And then, did anybody else have any questions on this slide before I would go to the next?
I was curious about the bottom line. Douglas County, they pay $11.16, but you said the state minimum wage was $11.25.
Non-urban, it's 11 Douglas.
In the urban.
Oh, they're
areas,
considered
there's a
rural, so they would be-
non-urban
Yes.
rural,
It's
which is
$11 an hour.
They would be considered rural.
Yes, there were specific counties that were called out.
As
that
rural.
The rural could be
So
applied
is
to.
all of Lane County considered urban?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we're at what's considered the standard rate, which is $11.25.
Okay,
And
so
we are above that.
all of Lane County is urban,
Yes,
and even though some of Lane County is rural and some is urban, all of Douglas County is rural, even though some of Douglas County is urban.
for purposes of this
Yeah.
requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, let's see. So I just wanted to talk for a minute. Let me make sure, yeah, there we go. About the positions that we have here at the county. And I would like to say with specificity, this chart was created at the time we were researching this packet. So this was a moment in time snapshot, and even since then, those numbers have changed. My understanding is of this morning, it's gone from 15 regular Lane County employees under $15 an hour to 9. And that's just because at any, given time, people are promoting or leaving or what have you. That's just the nature when you have a large employee base. But what we were trying to do was just highlight for you the information around the classifications, the number of employees, and what their hourly base rate is, so that you could, have that visual based on the discussion that we heard that you wanted today. So it's, 15 there, 9 today. So it's a relatively small number of employees that sit at that hourly base rate. But the other point that I wanted to just have a little bit of discussion about, which is when we think of public sector employment versus private sector employment, some of the differences that, in addition to the base rate of pay, which you see on the slide, the public sector does generally offer far more benefits than the private sector. So for example, we have a custodian listed with a base rate of $13.77 per hour. But when you think of total compensation, that number moves to $15.78 per hour. And that total compensation rate that we look at includes like calculating the formula for the Oregon Public Employees Retirement System, any time management and leave benefits that employees get, holidays, et cetera, minus the employee contribution to health insurance. And then there are a variety of other things that I believe you all are aware of that I think makes Lane County very attractive as an employer. We have other employment benefits like deferred compensation. We have an incredible wellness clinic. We offer professional development, county-provided training, and scheduled pay raises and a pay structure. So I just wanted to be mindful of, while we talk, and I know your policy discussion is on the base wage, we also do offer additional value to quantify for what we would call in our industry a total comp rate. So just for illustrative purposes. Let's see, other than that, I would just as a note for consideration, wage rates are considered a mandatory subject of bargaining. So of course, depending on discussion and direction, that would be something that might come into play depending on the final direction of the board. And at this time, really, this is a discussion item only. So I would turn this back over to Chair Sorensen for board discussion at this time.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I know this is a increasing discussion around the country about whether or not government should go beyond the minimum wage laws that are established by either the federal government or the state government and have local option policy minimum wage law. And I just want to start this off by saying a number of areas where we operate as a county government, we are constrained by state law, and there's a preemption of our authority to establish minimum wage laws, other than for ourselves as a county government. Do you know if this is one of those areas where those three rates, Portland, regular, and rural, do you know if those three rates can be altered by local governments?
I have not had that discussion with county council. I could certainly follow up with them to this.
It's probably going to be a follow-up
Sure.
to this discussion. And it is outside, I'll just say in your defense, it is outside of the scope of this, because this was all about Lane County government. But maybe if there is an opportunity. Now, if there's a preemption and there is no opportunity, then maybe we won't have that discussion. Okay, I know Commissioner Buck.
Commissioner Sorensen, just,
Yeah, go ahead.
it was preempted in the bill.
It was,
Yes.
okay.
That was one of the ways they got the bill passed, was to have a statewide preemption on local minimum wages.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Buck.
I want to thank you for the research. I thought Commissioner Farr brought up a good point, and I wanted to follow up on that question regarding temps and other kinds of employees that may fall below. Because here, what you're presenting is originally it was presented that we really only had 15 people that fell under this threshold. And now it sounds like maybe there's only 9, but that did not necessarily include some people in some other categories. And I would be interested in knowing that.
Absolutely. Commissioner Buck and Chair Sorensen, what I can tell you is just some general numbers. So to put it in perspective, today, the county has 2,068 active employees, so under all categories of employment, not just regular employees. And the carve-out that the number I got this morning, thinking this might come up, is that there are a total of 354 of those employees that are under $15 an hour of a base wage. So the 354 minus the 9 regular employees. So that's the number that I have for today. And what that does is includes a variety of employment categories, regular employees, the 9 of today, and then others that we call temporary and extra help. And those categories are there, and the differences are the maximum amount of hours they are supposed to be able to work in those categories, for example. So, and then we do have seasonal. I don't know, I'm looking in the audience if that was included in the 354. Sorry, Inga Wood is also here crunching numbers in the background with Kristen in case we had any.
Numbers and feeding them to me. I can tell you, out of those, good morning, commissioners, sorry. Out of the 354 employees currently on the books, and I will say currently in our PeopleSoft system, because many times if we need seasonal employees to come back, say to work in our elections office when we have an election, or to work at the Lane Event Center, we may not, for the fair, we may not necessarily terminate them in the system. They'll be rehired and come work for just that seasonal piece of time. So out of the 354 employees, I can tell you 155 of them are Lane Event Center, and so most likely those are employees that have worked during our fair, and 125 of them are under the elections division. So that's a huge group between those two that make up that 354, when you're talking about most likely extra help employees that would fall under that $15 minimum.
Thank you. Just to follow up, given that the minimum wage is $11.25 currently, and it costs nearly $19 to get a regular affordable 2-bedroom apartment, you need to earn at least hovering around $19 an hour to be able to afford an apartment. Apartments, even a 1-bedroom, can range from $1,200 to $1,800 a month on wages like that. It's just not affordable. Hence, we're seeing more people on our street, more people that are needing social services, more people that are asking for some additional other income help in a different way, in a different form from our government and public agencies. And it is really important for me that if we're going to try to invest in our public and invest in ways in which we can find more efficient methods to use our social services for the people that are the most vulnerable, that there is a swath of people here right at that minimum wage to almost $19 an hour. That body of people that are working at that wage are those ones that are just falling off the affordability spectrum and are then looking for help in a different form of funding through our agency. It's really important to me that we can at least reach a $15 minimum wage. That doesn't even get them to the $19 for a regular two-bedroom apartment for somebody who's maybe a single parent. I really would like to see the county act in a way that supports those people that are at the edge of falling off the affordability spectrum. It can't feel good knowing that we are not paying people enough in our own house to be able, for them to be able to feed their kids, make the rent, or pay the mortgage, get their medical care, et cetera, et cetera. I want to feel good about what we're doing here at the county and how we're paying people. We do have good benefits. I will acknowledge that, but the benefits don't pay the rent. They need enough money to afford the rent and buy their groceries and get their kids a flu shot or more serious medical care or themselves medical care in general. So I just want to make an impassioned plea to the rest of the board that this is what it means to invest in our community, and this is what it means to help balance those social services that we're providing to the community in a different form, and maybe reduce who and the increase that we're seeing in social services throughout our community. And I'm hoping that the board will feel the same, and I'm interested in what everybody has to say.
Hey, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the comprehensive report, including the addendums that you just provided regarding temporaries. Now, and I understand that that large number are with the event center and with the elections. Those are people that work just for a season, basically. Not 100%, but probably the vast preponderance of those. So the list that we have here, are they all full-time employees? And they all receive the full benefits package in this list of, it's been winnowed to 9, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. This is regular employees that we have currently, and like Alana said, that's always a moving target, because keep in mind, we have merit increases as well. And so while some of these employees, even currently under the 9, may be under the $15 an hour, depending on where they fall with merit increases, and then as we move forward with collective bargaining and bargaining cost of living differentials, those in the future could be just a matter of time before they're above that $15 minimum.
Thank you. Then there's an additional point I'd like to make, and then a question. The point I'd like to make is that we are in a competition at all times for steady, qualified employees, and the competition becomes greater and greater as the unemployment rate goes down, for instance, and as other people are offering higher wages to compensate for the low unemployment rate. We're seeing that across the board. I spent a lot of years hiring lots and lots and lots of people at entry-level positions and at certificated positions. And at entry-level positions, here's where my question comes. At entry-level positions, quite often I had a 90-day or 520-hour probationary period, during which time we did pay close to minimum wage. But after that 90-day probationary period, there was typically a fairly significant adjustment that brought them to closer to the regular workforce. And then there were periodic adjustments beyond that, which we do have, as you state there, scheduled pay raises, periodic adjustments. So do we, are there any provisions in government, or do we have any provisions for a period of time, such as a temporary employment period or a initial employment period, where what I stated during that period of time is that if at any time within that period it becomes evident that you're not able to do the job as prescribed, or that your abilities and temperament are not suited to this company or line of work, the agreement will be terminated at that time. Do we have anything available to us like that, where we could offer a temporary period before people become established as a regular, full-time, ongoing?
So it varies depending on the collective bargaining agreement that you're speaking of. All of the ones listed here are under the AFSCME general unit. So under AFSCME's general unit, if you are hired at a step 1, so you're hired at the very step 1 of the scale, after 6 months, you will go to step 2, and that's when their probationary period ends. Almost all the other contracts here at the county, besides the AFSCME general unit, nurses, and I believe physicians, they have a 6-month probationary period. The rest have an entire year probationary period. And there's a couple caveats with licenses for our FAPO and LCPOA, depending on them completing those. So there is a bump if you are hired at the very entry-level step. And then, yes, there's a 6-month movement to a step 2. And then after step 2, or if you were hired at above a step 2, you will go to the next step with the completion of a year of employment and successful evaluation.
Which is a significant amount of time. And the temporary period that I always used was a very short period of time, designated as such, in order once again to determine that I'd made the right selection in employment for their benefit as well as for our own. And as you could tell by the way I recited that, I said those lines often. So the question then becomes the first step, from step 1 to step 2. Is that a larger step than step 2 to step 3? Now, all of these are, we see all of these numbers when we discuss in executive session, but.
Right, it's not a larger percentage. It's essentially between the steps is a percentage, and we try and keep that kind of consistent. I will tell you, if you're talking about non-represented employees and some of the other scales, there's an amount in between, and it's just kind of, Christine can talk a little bit more about that as to how those wage scales were established. But for these purposes, it's a percentage in between, and it's not larger or smaller from the 1 to 2.
And the incentive of making it a pretty large increase is that once again, in private industry, we're able to have the termination language in the initial hiring process, which we're not able to do, nor would I advise it necessarily. But what I'm seeking there is an initial period for people to be at a lower rate than what really is an ongoing steady rate. Now, I agree with Commissioner Buck in that we need to make certain that we are abiding by what we state as our desires for people who come into Lane County to employ people. We want people to be employed at or above the median wage. And so I'm interested in making certain not only that the people who are working for Lane County are able to pay their rent and feed their families, but also that they are not looking for employment elsewhere. So as this discussion goes on, I'm leaning toward finding a way to get into that $15, quite frankly, because I believe we need to be there. But we just need to make certain that that the other provisions that you're going to give us regarding the compression, for instance, and regarding equity based upon other job classifications, that we're able to manage that at the same time and see what the overall cost is. But I will state that I am interested in getting us to the $15 for the stated reasons that I've already made. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Chair Sorensen, thank you. I just wanted to go back to the question that was asked about the minimum wage and any preemption under the ORS. So hearing from our county council, there is language that talks about local government, including counties, et cetera, and that a local government may set minimum wage requirements for public employers. So, you can't go below the threshold, but you certainly could raise it up. So just wanted to follow up on that.
Okay. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thanks. I'll just state this up front. I don't support going beyond our current market-based pay policies for this. When I was in college, minimum wage was $2.25 an hour. You could not afford not even a first-floor basement apartment in a horrible neighborhood near my university I was going to on $2.25 an hour. So I had a roommate that also earned $2.25 an hour, and we managed to afford it between the two of us, cockroaches and all, in a crime-ridden neighborhood. But, that's part of moving forward. That was back when I was a busboy. Eventually, I worked up to be assistant manager at a restaurant before I graduated college and was able to actually afford an apartment, didn't have cockroaches. And I wasn't worried about where I parked my car at night. So, you know, we talk about, should we be able to afford a two-bedroom apartment on starting wage? When was that a requirement of us to provide that? That you didn't have to either have a spouse or a roommate or somebody else that also maybe earned that wage, and that you didn't consistently improve your ability to earn as you move through life. Our current wages, if you don't include benefits, right now at 14, 17, in 1 year, you would be at 15 under all of our contracts. Because I think our lowest step right now is 3.75%, and our lowest COLA is 2% in a lot of our contracts. So if you take 14, 17 and add those two things to it, you're at 15 in 1 year. So I think this is, you know, a solution looking for a problem. You know, so much, and I just don't understand. And if it's $19 to afford a two-bedroom, why don't we just jump straight to 19? Why 15? Where's this artificial line that we've drawn at 15? You know, I am concerned because what it does actually end up doing is drawing down our resources and our ability to provide services to folks that possibly aren't employed. I mean, we start talking about some of our temp employees at elections. A lot of those are seniors with other incomes. And, you know, is our wage the only income in a family? You know, that just, you know, just seems like we just need to manage our taxpayers' resources to provide the maximum amount of services that they're asking for. And, you know, if we start going beyond market-based pay and establish some artificial dollar amount, not including benefits, I can guarantee you in the private sector, you cannot find a place where if you get a wellness check, you get basically free family coverage, you know, in health benefits. In fact, most places, if you go from single coverage to family, there's a premium you pay to your employer for that family coverage versus single, and deductibles are far higher, et cetera. It's just, to me, this is just something that goes well beyond what we need to be doing. It'll be extremely costly to renegotiate with our 8 bargaining units, a mandatory change, and the compression issues it'll cause, and it's a problem that is curing itself. Even at 1377, ignoring step increases, just using 2% COLAs, you'll be at $15 an hour in 4 to 5 years. So I don't support moving beyond our current policy.
Commissioner Burney.
You know, there's always room for improvement, but I heard that this is a fairly good place to work. And congratulations, Steve, on that designation, because I think you have more to do with it than I do. So I just have a question here. I didn't do the exact math, but I heard you say, Inga, that approximately of the, you know, correct my numbers, of the 350 some for employees that are making under $15 an hour. Am I with you so far?
Yes.
Okay. That when you added elections that were seasonal, well, I guess the season is the election season, and fairground, which is seasonal, it sounded like you came down to what, 70 something?
Yeah, total with those is 280. What did I say? Sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
say
I'm asked.
280 from
I could do this.
354, yeah.
and then minus the 9 regular status.
Oh, the
from the
4.
15.
So about 70, yeah, 70.
Those 70, are there any, does the term temporary employee, are there people that are working all the time that are called temporary employees?
That's really kind of a difficult question to answer.
apologize,
Because
yeah.
it's okay. You can have temporary employees. You can have a 520 employee working full-time. They're limited on 520 hours in the year, so they can essentially work full-time for 3 months.
Well, that,
Or a 1,040-hour employee for 6 months for full, but normally that's not how they work. It's usually they're working 20 hours a week or 5 hours a week, or, it's really giving that flexibility for temporary work or project work, seasonal work like elections and the fair.
okay, so if one figures about 80 hours is a year's worth of work,
Correct. Yes.
which is what I always figured,
Yeah.
then there is no one in the temporary designation that's working close to that.
Not at this rate, no. And we do have unclassified professional exempts that are non-represented employees that could be working close to 2,080, but normally they're not as well. But they don't have that limit of the 140.
Well, then,
So
here's a real pointed question. Could, for our next part of this discussion, could you let me know as of, let's say, June 30, whenever this fiscal year, or July 1, about what cost it would be to Lane County for people that are, no matter what their designation is, are working over 2,000 hours a year, what it would actually cost us to bump them up? Because I don't think it's very much. I mean, from everything I'm gathering, that would be useful information. I'm trying to move this away from the philosophical and the symbolic to the pragmatic, and I would just like that. I would like to also, is that okay?
for those over
is that
2,000
reasonable?
hours a year, is that what you said?
Yeah, just to be finite, so you at least have some framework to make an estimation, because people are going to get bumped up anyway, right? Like, as Commissioner Bozovich said, in some ways, it's a problem that's solving itself with a lot of people, it looks like. And then also, I would be interested of that number, if you take the hourly total comp rate, what that number then dwindles down to. And then finally, my only point with these numbers is it's the job of management to extend services, I believe, to as many people as possible, and it's the job of unions to negotiate for as high a wage hour and condition package for their members, which, and I'll get my head chopped off for this, but which means that sometimes, I'm not saying here, but sometimes labor unions tend to be exclusionary in the sense that they're going to make sure their members are taken care of, but that can limit the number of new people that come in. So you have all these different dynamics, and I just want you to know that I appreciate that. And that's why I'm just asking for straight numbers so we can look at it and see if there is a there there.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering, just to help and with an initial answer to that, if we could invite Christine Moody, our budget manager, up to provide an initial response to Commissioner.
That was fast.
Yeah, I was trying to give.
We tried to be prepared.
I know that there's going to be a
just in
definitive
case.
answer to it, but just at least to sort of paint the picture for you.
Yeah, just on the question of costing or picking specific employees out, as Inga mentioned, we have salary schedules that have certain percentages between step. We have grades that have certain percentages. So we couldn't come to you with an initial estimate because we don't know what to do with everyone else. So you've got people at the bottom of the scale making below 15, but you've got people at the top making over 15. What do we do with them? Do we push them up by the same percentage? Do we then push grade? It's the compression that Commissioner Bozovich discussed. So without knowing those pieces, it's difficult. We can't give you a dollar figure without all that trickle down.
If I may, I appreciate compression my neck and back are experiencing as we speak. But my question was not taking into consideration the implications. I was just looking for a feel for how many people in the dollar. I get, then we got to consider this and that and how it affects. I was just asking for, without considering all those things, how big is this an issue or not for Lane County? That's all. I apologize.
Is it an
I'm
issue?
trying to make it simpler.
When you say, is it an issue, I guess I don't know how to answer that.
Well, this board asked that question with a concern that we are supporting living wages in Lane County. In fact, Commissioner Buck just suggested that even $15 an hour is not living wages, and Commissioner Bozovich suggested get a roommate, which I also did. I would like to say years, but actually it was more than a decade
We'll have one. She's named Elizabeth.
No comment. So I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor this, but it's not an issue, it's a question. It's trying to get specific to get some clarity. And that is, how many people does this impact? And if they were brought up to $15 an hour, what would that look like before we even get into all the implications that would mean for all the other bargaining units, other people's wages, et cetera? I just want to see what's there. That's all I meant. I apologize.
Okay.
Does that give you?
It does, it just, yes, yeah, we'll just caveat the
Caveat
answer that that
your
is not
heart's
the total
content, yeah.
cost. I couldn't say what the total cost is. Right.
Understood.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Well, I think for me, I have both kind of a philosophical component to my questions about this, but also a practical. So on the practical side, I think that the questions asked by Commissioner Burney specifically, how many people are affected by this if we were to change our policy to have market-based above a set minimum. And let's just say $15 is the set minimum. So I am interested in those answers to those questions. But I'm also interested in the philosophical part of it, namely that minimum wages, family leave laws, parental leave laws. It seems to me that those are opposite the idea that there is strictly a market relationship between the employer and the worker. And so for me, it's not a difficult leap to say, well, there's lots of factors that go into what the level should be, but in my view, there's no doubt. And I did have a question on the previous slide. You said if there's no more questions, and then I didn't get my question in. That was the Deschutes custodian is non-urban, so that'd be 11, right? The Deschutes custodian would be 11, right? There's a second line.
Deschutes is non-urban or not.
So you're reporting they are paid $15.89, but their county minimum wage is 11. So they're like almost $5 above their minimum wage. Where Lane County, our custodian, $13.77, is below the standard rate of $11.25. I mean, we're above the standard rate, but our standard rate's $11.25.
Considered rural, it's considered the same as us.
Is Deschutes considered urban and Douglas County's considered rural?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's weird. Okay.
Maybe it's driven by Bend.
Yeah. So anyway, I was just curious, since they're both are market-based, Deschutes is market-based, and they're $15.89, and we're market-based, but we're $13.77. I would think we should be higher than Deschutes. You see? So I don't understand how we are lower than Deschutes, even though, in my mind, Deschutes is got a lower market for wages than Lane County.
Talk about our comparables.
Do you know why that is?
I'll start. I know Inga's looking at a couple of things. Well, first of all, we do our, every time, we prepare packages and come to the board, when we talk about compensation for classifications, we look at our comparables, our comparator counties that are asterisked, and there's averaging, and there's formulas put in place so that it's not going to just be matching one, but it's taking all of them and then stripping away things that might offset each other. And I'm not sure, Inga, what else you would add to that?
I know for Deschutes, their cost of living because of Bend is increased, and so they take that into account, I believe, too. I was just asking Kristen, because we keep track. I don't know if we have the data on who Deschutes uses for their market comparators. We have the 5 set by the board, but they may take into account others, and I'm not sure about who they use for their market. So that could be based on who they actually use for their market comparators.
I thought you were going to say the reason that Deschutes and Lane are different on custodian isn't because we're both market-based, it's because it's negotiated. And the negotiation may be influenced by the market and may be influenced by the comparators, but it's not market-based. It's actually because of negotiations.
That's absolutely a
Is that a
possibility.
fair statement?
Mr. Chair, so the other thing that when we look at market comparisons, we take a classification, we look at our 5 comparables, like classification compared to the classification in our organization, and we look at that range.
With total
Right.
comp, not
With total comp,
base
right.
salary.
Right, but we also do look at the salary, and then we factor in total comp. Here, you're looking at 2 points in time. You're taking an individual that is, we've just picked the individual in the classification making the least amount of a regular employee in Lane County, and then we took the same for Deschutes County. So we're sort of, it's an apples and oranges kind of comparison here. We look at market comparison, we look at the entire range.
Right.
Here, you may have a custodian in Deschutes County that's been there for 10 years, and they're higher in the range, and we have a custodian that was hired recently, and they're lower in the range. So it's sort of, do you understand that?
Yeah.
I think this is a risky thing to look at
It
as it
is.
relates to market comparable.
Correct.
It's really just a point-in-time snapshot of the 2 lowest paid employees within from an hourly standpoint within an organization.
May I add something as well? So since we're talking specifically about the custodian classification, I did ask for what the ranges are, because as you're aware, you heard the discussion, we could hire someone in at step 1, but our salary ranges for this unit go up to step 10. And so for custodians, step 1 starts at $12.82 an hour, but at step 10, it's $17.79 an hour as the base wage. So, depending on where people sit on the range, you could have folks sitting higher than what's indicated there. And I just wanted to bring that up as a reminder that not everyone sits at step 1 or at the step 1377. Indeed, we probably have a lot of folks in this organization who we retain for a long time that are sitting on the higher end of our scales in general. So just.
Well, I think that this discussion is good, and I think that some more numbers will be helpful in a future discussion. Commissioner Buck.
I just had, a couple final thoughts. I know that it's been mentioned that if you don't make enough, that you should get a roommate to be able to afford something. And I just want to remind folks that there are lots of people that have roommates. They're 2 years old, they're 4 years old, they're 6 years old, they're children. These people are raising families at these low wages. And we wonder why they're going to our social service centers in order to feed their families and get basic care. This is a way in which we as a county can walk our talk and say we care about our employees, not just about their benefits in our wellness center, but that they can pay the rent. I would like to see us as a board at least have a policy that we want to get people to that $15 an hour. And then one other point is, yes, we have temps and extra help. Often these people are people of color, minorities, very low income. And we should be paying everybody a minimum wage in order to pay their rent. Some seasonal people have to pick up multiple jobs in multiple places in order to just have a regular amount of money coming in every month to pay the bills. So I just want to end my comments with being very plain, that it's important to me that we pay a living wage, regardless of the type of job that they're doing, that we pay at least 15. And everybody can feel like when they're an employee of Lane County, whether they're full-time, temporary, or seasonal, that they matter and we care that they can feed their family and they can pay their minimum bills and have a decent life.
Thanks. One final request on the future arithmetic down the road. And Commissioner Buck just reminded me of it, and that is with the large number of people who are receiving supplemental nutrition assistance, SNAP benefits, I've heard it's like 20% of the Lane County population. I wonder how many, another way of dealing with this at sort of the philosophical levels, what Lane County employees are eligible for SNAP benefits? In other words, that our wages are such that we are as a if we wanted to have a policy issue, we're going to at least pay what we think, could keep people out of SNAP benefits. In other words, if they're so poor that the national government thinks they're poor enough to receive supplemental benefits, that would also deal with some of these questions commissioners are stating that, oh, well, the high-income retirees are the people that work at elections or at the fairgrounds, as opposed to poorer people that might be working at election. In other words, that if we knew that, if we could figure out what that is, again, we don't want to belabor these statistics because you have plenty of other things to do. But just one way of determining is, of all those people that are listed up there, at point in time, right, the administrator reminds us, this is point in time data, are people that are living in that have two kids that work for Lane County that earn $13.77 plus benefits, are they eligible for food stamps if they have two children living with them, or a spouse, or an elderly relative, or what, are they eligible? I don't really know how it works now. I don't know how it works.
We will look into that.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with the desire to give everyone a living wage. Absolutely, 100%. I did not run for county commissioner so that I would exclusively be looking at the wages of county employees. I am interested in doing that for everybody. I'm interested in doing that for the common person that doesn't have access to the incredible benefits of being an employee at Lane County, which I am all for. But I just want to remind us that there are tens and tens and hundreds of thousands of people that if they listen to this discussion under the circumstances they are living in, it might sound a little frustrating. So I just wanted to point out, might be a lot of philosophy about nothing in terms of the subject, but I am as concerned about every man, woman, and child in Lane County, and especially Springfield, as I am about those that work for the county and allow us to do the good work that we're doing. And I don't want to lose sight of that. That's all.
Okay. Commissioner Farr.
And just along those lines, we do have a certain amount of control over what private industry pays in our community, and that is when we are courting them to come to open a business or open a manufacturing plant inside of one of our enterprise zones or inside of a tax, that place where they're going to receive reduced taxes. At which point, Commissioner Stewart and I spent a couple of years on the West Eugene Enterprise Zone Committee talking about specifically what are we going to require that new employers coming into our area and receiving tax benefits, what do they pay? And we always look at a certain amount of compensation for the new employees that we do have control over. My point there is we have control over the employees who are coming into town for new companies. We also have control over the people who we employ. That's the only two areas that we can really control it. And while I share Commissioner Burney's general regard for making certain that people are able to make ends meet in order to stay in their residence, in order to pay their medical bills, their child care, the other things that they need to pay, we don't have a great deal of control over that, generally speaking. But we do have control over the people who work here. And we do have control over the people who we invite to open a new company in one of our enterprise zones. So this is an opportunity for us to exercise discretion in ways that we can't generally in private industry.
Plus one, and absolutely am looking forward to continuing this with our employee base. I also would like to just add, there's another area that we are starting to look at having some influence over, and that is the components of the community benefits agreement. And especially in that, since one of the areas is living wages and giving a priority to that for vendors initially in the construction trades, I'm just agreeing with and adding to what Commissioner Farr said. So I'm delighted that we're looking at how we can impact that as much as possible, and I'm delighted to continue the conversation about Lane County employees.
And in 1975, I was a custodian. I was a night janitor at the Trailways Bus Depot, and I was getting the minimum wage, which was $1.25 an hour.
As was I at Coco's restaurant as a busboy.
Federal was higher, but Oregon was lower at that point.
Yes, Mr. Administrator.
I'm just wondering, as it sounds like the conversation is wrapping up here, if we could get, I don't know that you need a motion, but if someone could summarize, because there was a lot brought up, and one of the things we're finding with requests is that the initial request to look at a $15 minimum wage seems straightforward, but it can be really deep. We come back with an update on that, and now there's additional information. And I just want to make sure that when we come back to you, that we answer all the questions that you would like. So if we could get a summary.
Might I suggest that we consider this assignment done, and later in the meeting, when we have requests for future board agenda items, that at that time, the commissioner that wants to propose the follow-up do so?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and then, and just as you're thinking about assignments, I just want to ask that you try to be as specific as possible with what you would like to see us come back with.
Yep.
Because otherwise, we're left to sort of make some assumptions.
Yep.
And we can either assume too little or too much.
Yep.
And so as much feedback as we can.
That's why I'm suggesting we cut this off now and cross this off the list that we've done the assignment that was requested by the board. Okay.
I tried to be very specific about my question before this got global.
Yeah, and I'll call on Commissioner Burney to make that toward the end of the meeting so that we'll have this of what we're going to do. Okay. So now I believe we are ready to move to our executive session. I don't know if that's a 30-minute item or less, but I'm kind of hoping it is. And then we will go from there to the Board of Commissioners. So we'll go from here to the BCC small commissioner conference room for our executive session, first of two. And then we'll go to back to the boardroom for the volunteer appreciation luncheon. And then we'll come back at 1:30 to the Harris Hall. So at this time, we're going to go to our first executive session of the day, which is item number 10. And I'll read that in. This time, the Lane County Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel regarding the rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to RS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the persons listed. Representatives of the news meeting designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject matter of the session as previously announced. No decisions may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. So at this time, we'll be in a brief recess while we transition and move up to the Board of Commissioners conference room,
Do these
small.
after lunch.
We're going to do this after lunch, so please take these with you. And so we'll be going up there. We'll be doing our executive session, then we'll be in recess. For the lunch hour, we'll be reconvening here at 1:30 p.m.